Hello friends, it's Carla back today with a coloring video. We're going to be using Pam Bray's new Sensations stamp set. This is put out by Wild Whisper, and Pam's beautiful collection is just wonderful. You'll definitely want to check that out. Her stamps are gorgeous. We're going to create a slimline card, and you just saw the card base there that I had pulled out, and so I'm going to stamp the flowers, which are a really nice large size, and we're going to use some Gina K amalgam black ink and stamp that down onto some Bristol smooth cardstock. So I really like using Bristol cardstock when I'm doing watercoloring. I find that it helps these zig markers blend really nicely, and it takes the watercolor nicely. So I'm coordinating the colors that I'm pulling out with the colors in this paper pack that coordinates, and I can easily do that by just having the paper close. I know if I get colors that are going to coordinate with this pack, then I can use any of the papers in the pack to finish off my card when I complete it. So here you can see I pulled out some basic colors, and we've got sugared almond pink, we've got a peach pink, and then pink. Those are the three shades of pink that I'm going to use. Now when I do zig watercoloring, I find that it's easier to lay down the lightest shade first, and this gives me a base of color on the part that I'm coloring. So I'm laying down the pink, the sugared almond pink first, and then I'm going to come in with my next color. So that's the peach pink. It's a little bit darker, and I'm just now adding in the shading that I want to use, and I just add shading wherever I kind of feel like it, along one edge usually, and I don't worry too much about where the sun is hitting or all that, but I just want to have a definite look of shading and highlights. And then I come in with the pink, and you can't really see here, but it does give a little bit darker layer, and we're going to start blending that out. So I've laid all my color down first, and then I'm going to start the water pen. Just make sure there's water flowing out of it by squeezing it a little bit, and then I'm going to start blending the dark parts. So the parts that the darker colors are on, I'm going to blend those out first, and then I'm going to wipe my brush, and I'm going to go in and start blending the lighter, because I don't want it to look like it's all one color pink. So if I go into the lighter area and kind of pull that then into the darker area and blend where they meet, I can still end up with a shaded and highlighted area. And it just looks like it's blended nicely, but it's not a totally solid pink color. Now we've got haze blue, light blue, and Persian green. Those are the colors that I'm going to use for the blues. And I'm going to do the same kind of coloring. So I'm laying down the lightest blue first, the haze blue, and then I'm going over with the light blue, and that's in the parts that I want to look like they're shaded, and then adding just a little bit of color with that Persian green. The Persian green is pretty dark, so I'm just putting a very thin line of it, and that will pull out when I use the water brush. So going into that darkest area, pulling it out, you're not going to see a whole lot of water flowing from the brush. You don't want that. You just want it to lightly be spreading your color. And here you can see I'm going into the lighter areas, and if you feel like there's not enough water flowing, you can squeeze it, but do that over a napkin or something, and just so that you still get those areas of highlights and areas of shading, you can rub your brush off every once in a while. So here I've stamped the really pretty dragonfly, and we also have a couple butterflies on here. And I'm just adding different shades of those same blues that I used for the flower and adding in some colors. So I used the really light haze blue on the lighter areas, and then I colored in the light blue on that middle area, adding a little bit of the Persian green. So we're just going to have two color blend on this part so that you get a lighter area of blue, and then you get a little bit darker where you have the light blue and the Persian green. And you can go back and forth and just kind of add little dots of color. These are small spaces, so you don't need to add a whole lot of ink down, and it doesn't take long to blend, which is nice. But you can see here when I do use those two tones, it really does add a nice element of shading to this and nice dimension. For the butterflies, this one I'm using the same pinks and just varying the lights and darks that I added on the flowers. But you could definitely have the multicolors. They're so pretty the way she designed them. And these are hand drawn by Pam. I do have a video that is up and shows her complete collection. If you want to see what's in it, definitely have a look at that, and you'll see how beautiful those papers are and how well the stamped images are going to match those papers. And she also has some flare badges and a new embossing powder, which is really fun, and we're going to use that at the end. So again, I'm just blending those colors lightly, and here I'm bringing in the yellows. So I have a flesh color, which is a pretty neutral color, and then the yellow, and I'm using that for the light and the darker yellow. And if you didn't have a I'm bringing in a light brown as well, just to give a little darker dimension, almost a gold element to the edges of that. So you can get some different colors just by mixing what you have. You don't need a huge collection to get a lot of different shades of color. These zig markers are really fun to work with, and you can really do a lot with them. So I find just having a basic really light color that you can start with really helps. Here's the greens that I'm using. I grabbed a yellow green, a green shadow, and a deep green. So I'm using those on the dragonfly here to make him kind of a blue-green dragonfly. And I think this stamp set really is wonderful for summer and for spring, and really nice to create some beautiful cards to send out to people while they're home. This would work wonderfully for Mother's Day as well. And the dragonfly even you could do for a Father's Day card. Now you can see here I went a little bit out of the lines, and I'm just showing how I fixed that. I use a clean water brush, so make sure my water brush doesn't have any paint on it or marker, and then I take the water and rub it over the area where the paint went outside the line, and then just take a clean tissue and dab that on. I did that 3 times, and that picked up the parts of the marker that went outside. And as long as you do that quite quickly, it actually lifts that marker up quite well. I'm going to add a few different colors on the butterflies and just use those same pinks and blues that I had used on the flowers. And here we have some grays that we're using for the body of the butterflies and the dragonfly. So we've got a light gray and a blue gray. And even though you're not blending a whole lot, It does make a difference when you add a couple different colors, but if you felt like there was an area that was really small, then I would just go ahead and use one marker. So you'll see after with those little tiny leaves, I actually just color them in with a marker and don't do any blending. But here we're adding a little bit of the yellow colors and those yellow tones to the little flowers, and then I actually pull in a light green, so I color the base of the leaves with the green shadow, and then I go in with the light green and do my highlights and the veins of the leaves. And I just felt like that worked better than the other color that I had, the other colors that I had there. And just blend that out. So as long as you know, if you have a different style and you feel it blends better for you, then do whatever works. If you want to try this and see if that works, this is kind of the method that I follow, and I find that I always am happy with the results. So we have a beige and a brown to go in and do some of our centers, and I pulled in that flesh color that we used with the yellows as my base. So this colored up really quickly, and it matches our papers beautifully. It's nice and bright and spring-like, and we've got the varying but similar colors in the dragonfly and the butterflies. And I'm going to actually put a card together Friday on the Wild Whisper website, and then you'll be able to see this stamp and the butterfly and dragonfly elements all together on a card. So you'll be able to find that Friday afternoon on the Wild Whisper blog. But I wanted to bring you the stamp coloring just because it is a little bit longer video, and in case you wanted to try some with the zig markers. It's a really nice relaxing way to sit down and color and then make your images into a card after. So I'm using some Jelly Roll white and Stardust gel pens to add some details. The Stardust is really shiny. Adds a really shiny look in the sunshine especially. It shows up so nicely. And then I find using the white gel pen just to add some dots and some lines really adds a nice effect to the images. Then I'm going to use some of that new embossing powder I was telling you about. I'm using a powder bag to go over so that I don't have any spots that the embossing powder will stick to that aren't supposed to. I have some Distress embossing pens, which are an embossing ink in the pens, and I'm just going over the areas that I want the embossing powder to stick to. This bronzed anther embossing powder is a lovely dark brown powder, and it has little tiny beads, almost a kind of a bronze bead that is in the powder. So sometimes you'll see little pieces of this bronze bead sticking up and you'll get a textured look. It's actually very cool and gives you a really neat textured effect and has that lovely dark powder. So I'm melting the powder on. It melts pretty quickly, and I decide I want a little bit extra on some of the flowers just to have a more chunky appearance. So I'm actually using a embossing dabber ink, and I painted it on in the areas that I wanted a little thick, just so it would hold on to that powder and give me a really textured look. And there you go. You can see the fun textured element in the background and everything finished there and colored up. Here I've added a picture of the card that I completed for the Wild Whisper blog today, and you can pop over there by clicking on the links below. You can see I've added some of Pam's beautiful papers and her stamps in there, and inside we've stamped one of the gorgeous sentiments. So I hope you really have a wonderfully happy day, and be sure to check the Wild Whisper blog.